I was sitting across from the private membership group that could fill our dining rooms for the next year when their attorney stopped the signing. The room smelled like lemon oil, chilled water, and the butter Carter was browning behind the kitchen doors. And I had spent all morning making sure nothing about that table looked desperate. My phone lit up beside the contract. Just close it. Babe. For one clean second, I still believed we were building the same future. The attorney cleared his throat, just enough to make the woman beside him lower her pen. Ems. Rourke. Before we proceed, I need to confirm something in the public record. His eyes moved from the laptop to my face with the kind of pity professionals try to hide. Are you aware that the court system shows you and Mr. Body? Bellamy finalized a divorce several months ago. The water glass in my hand stayed steady, but everything behind my ribs went cold. I did not look at the membership director, or the contract, or the door Carter would eventually walk through wearing his chef coat like armor. I looked at the phone again, at Babe sitting there in blue letters, fresh enough to still feel warm. That is not correct, I managed, and my voice sounded useful, polite, almost normal. The attorney explained that they could not sign a year-long agreement while disclosures, marital status, and authority to represent the business were unclear. Outside that room, forks kept touching plates and staff kept moving through service as if my life had not just split open under the table. I thanked them, asked for time to review the discrepancy, and stood before anyone could see my knees weaken. Carter had called me his wife in every room that served him, but on paper, somewhere I had never been invited to read, he had already made me his former one. And if I never received one notice, then someone had made sure I did not. I left the signing table with a folder pressed against my ribs and enough manners on my face to get through the hallway. By the time I reached the parking garage, my hands were shaking so hard I had to sit in my car before I could call Tara Whitcomb. She did not waste a second comforting me with soft words. Come to my office, Sadie, and do not call Carter before I see what they saw. Tara's office sat above a quiet block downtown, the kind of place where bad news arrived in clean folders and people learned to breathe through it. She pulled the court record, read in silence, then turned the screen toward me. The divorce was real, finalized months ago, with a waiver, a settlement, and a mailing address listed as our operations office instead of our home. The signature at the bottom was mine. That almost made it worse. It was not crooked, not copied, not some ugly little fake that a stranger would catch in 5 minutes. It had my soft first letter, my fast middle stroke, the small lift at the end I never noticed until it was sitting under a judgment I did not know existed. I signed this, I whispered, and Tara's face did not move. You signed something, but that does not mean you understood what he put in front of you. The memory came back in pieces, all too ordinary to look dangerous at the time. Carter had walked into my office with a thick stack of renewal papers while the kitchen was short-staffed. Payroll had kicked back, and a private client was demanding a full menu change before dinner. Macy Ellison stood beside the desk with colored tabs already placed along the edges, her voice gentle as she slid the pen toward me. Just the yellow spots. Sadie, I already sorted them for you. Macy had once cried in our back hallway because a former boss kept her tips and her roommate had changed the locks. I gave her shifts, taught her how to read a room, and told her that dignity was not something rich people handed out. Now her fingerprints were all over the day my marriage disappeared into paperwork. Tara closed the folder and told me to get the certified copies, the mail log, the scan history, and every message from that week. Then go home without letting Carter know I had finally read the page he buried. When I got home, Carter was in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, slicing lemons beside fish as if the day had ended clean. The house smelled like browned butter, parsley, and wine, the comfort he offered before explaining why he had missed dinner. He looked over his shoulder with warmth people trusted across dining rooms. How did the signing go? I set my bag down slowly, because the certified copy felt heavier than the table I had left. It got delayed, I answered, keeping my hand on the strap until my fingers stopped shaking. Carter's knife paused for less than a breath, then kept moving through lemon. They need a few disclosures cleaned up. His phone sat face down beside the cutting board, close enough for him to touch without looking worried. On the rim of the wine glass near it was a mark I knew was not mine. Anyone stop by the kitchen today? I reached for water, letting the question sound like habit. Carter salted the fish and shrugged. Staff. Produce guy. Macy came through to check linen for the weekend. She is better with those details than the crew. He said her name like a practical adjustment. Like placing Macy near our guests and vendors was only smart management. I drank the water and tasted nothing. I went into my office, locked the door, and called Della Monroe before grief could slow me down. Papers rustled on her end. How quiet do you need this? I closed my eyes and saw Macy's colored tabs along the page that had buried my marriage. Quiet enough that nobody knows we looked until the records can speak first. By midnight, Della had found the first loose threads, Ellison Event Support, Mile High Linen Reserve, and a florist with missing receiver names. All approved by Carter on nights he claimed the kitchen needed him late. Some deliveries matched Macy's days off, and one wine dinner photo showed Carter behind her with his hand resting low on her back. It was too familiar to explain away. I saved the image beside the divorce file, then named the folder Not Noise. Proof. Carter did not bring Macy into the room all at once. He let her appear in small, useful places, where no one could accuse him. She checked linen before tastings, confirmed floral notes, and remembered which regular hated lilies. When a longtime client thanked her by name, Carter smiled like her presence already belonged there. I watched Macy stand half a step behind him, quiet enough to seem respectful and close enough to be understood. She knew Carter liked his side towels folded twice, knew Diane Bellamy took her tea plain, and knew one guest wanted sparkling water first. Those details were not learned from one staff briefing. They came from nights I spent alone, believing the kitchen needed my husband more than I did. Diane invited me to lunch near Cherry Creek, where women spoke softly because everyone listened harder that way. Macy was already there, sitting beside Diane with both hands around her tea. Diane looked at me over her glass and sighed. You have been under so much pressure, Sadie. Carter needs some peace around him, too. Macy lowered her eyes like the sentence hurt her more than it hurt me. I never wanted to be in the middle of anything, she murmured, and the woman beside her reached for her hand. Nobody accused me directly. They only made me smaller one careful sentence at a time, until the room had permission to pity Carter before hearing what he had done. I left before my anger could become the story they wanted. Back at the office, the private membership group emailed that they were not canceling, but they needed a risk memo, an operational control plan, and confirmation of who could represent the business. The gossip had reached the contract before I reached my desk. That was when Carter found me in the pantry and dropped the gentle voice. If you make this ugly, the kitchen will know who to follow, he warned, close enough that I could smell mint on his breath. My phone was recording in my coat pocket. I kept my eyes on the folded napkins and asked, so I stay quiet. And the contract survives? Carter exhaled like I was learning. Exactly. The next morning, I stopped trying to look wounded and started making the room harder to lie inside. I did not post about Carter, did not call Macy a name, and did not ask Diane to explain herself to women who had already enjoyed the whisper. I opened our operating system, pulled the vendor permissions, and wrote a new rule that every change in linen, flowers, specialty food, staff assignments, and guest notes needed a ticket, an approver, and a delivery confirmation. When Carter saw the notice, He came to my office doorway with that calm face customers trusted and murmured, "You are turning dinner service into a courthouse." "Dinner service can stay beautiful," I answered, signing the policy while Della stood beside my desk with a folder under one arm. "The back end needs bones." Carter looked at Della, then back at me, and the shift in his eyes was small but clean. He had expected grief, not paperwork, and paperwork was harder to charm. He left without touching the doorframe, which told me he was angrier than his voice wanted to admit. Della kept digging while the kitchen pretended the new rules were only pre-contract discipline. She found flour invoices with inflated totals, linen charges approved twice under different descriptions, and small equipment purchases with no clear receiver name. None of it looked dramatic enough alone to stop a room, which was exactly why it had worked. The ugliness sat in ordinary amounts. Hidden among costs, every restaurant absorbs when service gets busy, and nobody wants to question the chef who makes clients happy. By lunch, I brought in Calvin Rourke, an independent kitchen operations consultant who hated personal drama almost as much as he hated missing logs. I did not tell him my marriage story first. I handed him the changed delivery records, Carter's approval history, the risk memo request from the private membership group, and the vendor notes Della had flagged. Calvin read for 10 minutes, then looked up and said, "This is not marriage trouble. This is an operational risk with a chef attached to it." By evening, the shortcuts began closing. Macy could no longer text vendors directly, could no longer touch guest lists without approval, and could no longer learn which table mattered before the room was set. Carter sent one message near midnight, "You're making this ugly." I saved it beside the recording from the pantry and finally answered nothing. The ugliness had started when he buried my divorce inside renewal papers and still expected me to smile over the menu. Carter chose the final tasting because he knew what it meant. The private membership group had agreed to return if that dinner proved our operation was stable, and every chair carried the weight of the contract he had damaged. By late afternoon, the first problem appeared when 2 boxes of mushrooms and beef were marked delivered to the wrong address. Then one of Carter's line cooks texted that he was sick, and the prep list vanished from the kitchen tablet. A year earlier, I would have run straight to Carter and begged him to fix what only he understood. That night, I called Calvin Rourke from the back office and watched him compare the delivery change with the access log. The address had been edited after closing from Carter's account, and Della had an email from the vendor confirming Macy had called to clarify the drop-off. Tara sent the legal hold before the first guest arrived. I switched to the backup menu we had tested quietly, pulled in 2 freelance cooks who still answered my calls, and let Calvin run the line under the protocol. The dining room never saw the missing boxes, only the first course landing warm and clean. Wine was poured, napkins folded back, and the membership director smiled at the trout like nothing behind the door had tried to break. That was the first time Carter's absence failed to scare the room. He came in after the 3rd course, wearing his chef coat and the face of a man expecting smoke. Instead, he found Calvin calling orders, Della checking vendor notes, and servers moving without looking toward him for permission. "What did you do?" he pressed near the service hallway, low enough for guests not to hear. I kept my voice even. "I operated." "You are going to destroy this place trying to prove a point." His jaw tightened when I did not flinch. "The contract stopped because of your paperwork." "Carter, the kitchen almost broke because of your delivery change. From now on, every sentence you speak stands next to a record." He looked toward the dining room, and for once, no one looked back for rescue. By the end of service, the membership group signed a letter of intent with conditions attached. They would continue only if I remained operational lead. Della controlled vendor approval. Calvin completed the audit, and Carter lost the power to change deliveries or staffing alone. The contract that had stopped because he erased me from our marriage was alive again because he could no longer move through the business unseen. The meeting happened in a conference room with no raised voices and no room for performance. Tara sat beside me with the certified divorce file. Della placed the vendor records in front of her, and Calvin kept the access logs clipped inside a plain folder. Carter came in with his attorney, wearing the calm expression that used to make clients forgive late courses and staff forgive bad moods. He looked at the table, then at me, and for the first time, the room did not move toward him. Tara began with the divorce papers Carter had buried inside renewal documents, the office mailing address, and the mail log showing the court notice had never gone to our home. Carter leaned back and said, "Sadie knew what she signed." Tara placed the renewal packet beside the waiver and asked why a divorce settlement had been scanned between liability coverage and vendor compliance if everyone understood what it was. Carter's face stayed still, but his hand closed around his pen. When Carter tried to say Macy was only staff, Della slid the invoices forward without drama. Ellison event support, the linen charges, the flower deliveries with missing receiver names, and the payments connected to Macy's circle sat there in clean rows. "Those are normal costs," Carter muttered. But Della tapped the dates matching Macy's days off and his late kitchen nights. Calvin followed with the tasting records, showing the delivery address changed from Carter's account after closing. Then the vendor email confirming Macy had called to clarify the drop-off. His attorney stopped taking notes. Carter looked at me like I had betrayed him by learning how to read the room he built against me. "You are doing all this because our marriage ended," he said, and the old version of me would have tried to explain my pain. I only looked at Tara, and she played the pantry recording where Carter told me the kitchen would know who to follow if I made things ugly. The consequences did not arrive as thunder. Carter was removed from executive control, barred from changing vendors or using our name in any new project while the civil claims moved forward, and locked out of the systems he treated like private property. Macy lost her freelance work before her supper club opened, because vendors heard legal hold and decided ambition was not worth a subpoena. Diane was not in that room, but the women who had repeated her lunch table pity stopped inviting her once the paperwork reached them. Della became controller with approval power, and Calvin stayed to rebuild the kitchen so no one person could hold it hostage again. Tara kept working to challenge the divorce judgment, not because I wanted Carter back, but because a lie should not wear the shape of law. Months later, the membership contract was signed under my name and the team that stayed. One evening after service, I ate alone at the end of the bar, Denver glowing outside the windows, and the quiet no longer felt empty. I did not leave that story with a louder voice. I left it with a clean table, a signed contract, and a quiet life no one had to approve. Some endings do not need applause. They only need one woman finally eating in peace, under her own name, with nothing left to prove.